So those hills that you see behind me, that is Greece. And right now I am in Western Turkey. In this video, we're gonna explore some of the more fascinating places in this meeting point of cultures and try to understand why so many places in this part of Turkey looks Greek. So it's 10 a.m. right now and I am in Izmir, which is the third largest city in Turkey, the second busiest port in all of Turkey, and the second largest metropolitan area in all of the Aegean Sea, which is primarily dominated by Greece and all of its little islands. In fact, when you take a look around the city, it looks a lot more like a Mediterranean city than it does like the traditional Turkish city with its architecture and trees. Right next to the main port is the main square of the city called Konak Square, which is marked by this symbolic clock tower behind me that was built in 1901. Definitely the most recognizable symbol of Izmir. Right next to it is this little beautiful mosque, which is really, really small. So when people actually pray out here, sometimes a lot of people line up outside the mosques praying out over here because they can't all fit in there. So right now I'm in Bazaar, which is the largest bazaar in Izmir and looks a lot like the Grand Bazaar, to be honest. It's very hot today, and honestly, this whole western coast of Turkey is really, really hot pretty much every day in the summer. I went to this really cool hostel that has got a cat and 5 super cute kittens and 2 chickens, and whenever we kill a cockroach we feed him to the chickens. Looks a lot like Jurassic Park when they feed that goat to the dinosaur.
Please, where are you from?
Bangladesh.
Welcome.
Thank you. Teşekkürler. So for the second stop of the day, I'm in this town called Sirence, which is actually like 70 kilometers south of Izmir, near the city of Selcuk. This place is famous for its traditional white houses. It's also famous for being in a valley right next to this huge hill, and you get gorgeous views across the valley from pretty much every house. But it's also famous for these pretty cobblestone streets and this market and everything that's around it. Sirence is also really, really famous for its wine. Apparently almost every house in this like village or town makes their own wine and they sell it, and it's mostly made out of fruit. They have a lot of wine tasting things in almost every street in the town. I just met a guy from LA who actually went to my university out in Izmir, and we're both here, so we're gonna do some wine tasting now. Is it made in Sirence, the wine?
Cherry, the cherry one?
Cherry, yes.
It's cherry.
Okay.
And maybe the peach?
I like this.
2 kadeh bardağı, yes.
Oh shit.
Oh no.
Oh no, oh no. Oh god. Okay. This is uncool. So Sirence is not exactly known for hiking, but I thought I saw a vantage point that looks really cool and I'm really glad I hiked up here. Okay, so I thought I was gonna end the vlog here, but I found some goats. So I had to include them in the final shot for the day. Now I gotta get down somehow. Okay, so it's the second day and I am in Ephesus, which is a very famous archaeological site next to Selcuk, which was the city where I was at yesterday. Ephesus is one of the greatest cities of the ancient world. This was built back in 10th century BC by the ancient Greeks, but then around 133 BC it became a Roman city and it became one of the most important cities in the entire Roman Empire. Second in size and importance only to Rome itself. And at its peak between 1st and 2nd century AD, there were around 400,000 people living right here. There used to be a port over here that had access directly to the Aegean Sea. What a lot of people don't know about Ephesus is that it's a very important site for Christianity. It attracted a lot of early Christian settlers, including Apostle Paul or Saint Paul. Supposedly Saint John was also here, but more on that from another location later in the day. I'm in one of the main attractions of Ephesus called the terrace houses. The cool thing here is that you can sort of come inside this building that was excavated and see what living inside these buildings from ancient Rome used to look like at one point. So it's very fitting that just like every other building in Turkey, there's a cat in this building as well. So behind me is the Library of Celsus, which is the most impressive building in all of Ephesus, and I'd say one of the better works of Roman architecture preserved in the whole world. It was built in 133 AD and used to be the third largest library in the ancient world at one point. It's definitely the most crowded part of this whole site, and if you want to get a good picture by yourself, I think the only time to get it would be like 8 AM right when it opens up. So just from all the grand architecture, you can probably tell Ephesus had a lot going on for it in its prime, but the thing that led to its rise was one of the things that led to its decline. The main port of Ephesus got silted up, it became a very hard place to access, and slowly it started to lose importance. And then in 3rd century AD, the whole city was sacked by some Germanic Goths, which sort of marked not only the decline of the city of Ephesus itself, but also the Roman Empire in general. So over time the city got forgotten and buried until the 19th century when it was excavated again, and today it's one of the largest excavated sites in the whole world. Okay, so right next to Ephesus are the ruins of the temple of Artemis, an ancient Greek temple that used to be one of the ancient 7 wonders of the world, but there's not really much left of it except for this one lone pillar behind me. So it's not the most impressive thing left. Okay, so I just took a taxi for like 15 minutes to get to the site up in the hills, sort of in the jungles, to see this very special place. So right now I'm at this place, which is believed to be the former house of the Virgin Mary, or Jesus Christ's mother. Remember when I said earlier that St. John is believed to have come to Ephesus too, along with St. Paul. But apparently, when he did come to Ephesus, he also brought the Virgin Mary with him. And this is the house where she is believed to have spent her last couple of years. You can sort of go in, take a look, but you can't film there or take photos, and people are worshiping inside and outside. So if you do come here, please be respectful.
Yesterday there was sun and there was rain, beauty in the mundane.
Today I'm in the westernmost point of the province of Izmir and the westernmost point of Western Turkey in a place called Cesme. This place is actually literally 5 kilometers from the Greek border that way behind me. And all the hills you see here from the coast, that's Greece right there. This is a pretty touristy town with lots of nice beaches and some cool stuff which I'm about to explore. Thankfully this is a lot cooler than Izmir and Ephesus because those couple of days were hell back there.
Breezy we go, easy, easy on our tiptoes, undercover agents of the other, beyond gravel.
Right next to the coast and sort of the harbor of Cesme is this beautiful, well-preserved and kind of big castle called Cesme Castle that was built by the Ottomans in 1508 here. As you might guess, this part of the Ottoman Empire was very exposed to attack and got attacked a couple of times by the Venetian Empire back in the days. And then they built this castle to have like sort of a line of defense against the Venetians. The castle itself has like a lot of walls and stairs that you can walk around and explore. And it's also got some cool rooms full of like exhibits of Ottoman history. So the city of Cesme is not really a trade center like it used to be, as you might guess easily from all the yachts in the marina. This is much more of a resort town these days where rich people come to spend their summer holidays.
Gravel beyond a bigger scale, the world inhales as we go.
For the last stop for today, I'm in this small village nearby Cesme called Alacati, which is famous for its really picturesque, beautiful, colorful houses and these alleys with lots of shops and lots of restaurants. I found out this place is very expensive, especially compared to the rest of Turkey. So this is not where you want to come for a budget meal or anything like that. Honestly, this whole western part of Cesme and Alacati, this whole area is mostly resorts. So it's pretty much impossible to find cheap accommodation here and very hard to find cheap food in general. Okay, so finally found a place where the prices are not too bad. Okay, that's it for today. Right now I'm back in Izmir to visit the most historical site in the city, which is the ruins of the ancient city of Smyrna. The first city that we know of in Izmir was actually founded by the Trojans 3,000 years ago. And ever since then, this place has hosted civilizations starting from the ancient Greeks, the ancient Romans, the Byzantines, the Ottomans, and everything else in between. The ruins of this particular city was actually built by the ancient Greeks in the 4th century BC, and then it was completely destroyed, this place, in an earthquake around the 2nd century AD. And it wasn't really excavated till 1933, and now you have this really cool but compact archaeological site. And without a doubt, the most stunning part of this whole archaeological site is this arcade with arches on all sides that you can walk through. This used to be the old agora of the city of Smyrna, and you can sort of walk underneath these arches to get a feel of what it must have been like to live in the ancient Greek or Roman Empire. So now I'm going to talk a little bit more about the more recent history of this place from about 100 years ago, and just try to explain to you why everything in Western Turkey looks so Greek, but there are no Greek people left here. If you haven't watched my vlogs from Sarajevo or Istanbul, I would recommend watching those too to get a better idea of the greater history of this region. The Ottomans were basically a dying empire for around 100 years before they even broke apart. But at the end of the 19th century, in 1897, the places under the Ottoman Empire directly had a population of around 19 million people, out of which 75% were Muslim, but the other 25%, importantly, were Christians, Jews, or people from other religions. Now, there was also another 20 million people living in places that were just nominally under the name of the Sultan of the Ottoman Empire, but were entirely out of his control. So when the 20th century started, they had tried really hard to sort of modernize their military, which was pretty backdated at the point. But despite that, they lost the Italo-Turkish War, which means they lost all their territory in North Africa. And in southwestern Turkey, these islands they lost to Italy, which now belong to Greece. Then the Ottomans lost the next Balkan War in 1912-13, which meant they lost pretty much all of their territory in the Balkan Peninsula, except for eastern Thrace, which is what the European part of Turkey is today. One important thing to note is while these wars were happening and Ottomans were losing territory, there were a lot of people that were displaced. Around that time, 400,000 Muslims that were living in areas that the Ottomans lost control of had to flee the area. Similarly, 400,000 non-Muslims that were living in what is Ottoman-occupied territory sort of had to flee that area to go to other places for safety. Then World War I started, and if you know, it was at first a war between Russia and the Austro-Hungarian Empire and the Germans. Now, Russians were a big enemy of the Ottomans, and they had lost a war to them previously. So the Ottomans teamed up with Germany to do a surprise attack on the Black Sea coast of Russia, and all the allies basically at that point declared a war on the Ottoman Empire. Now the Ottomans ended up losing that war along with Germany and Austro-Hungarian Empire, and what happened at the end of World War I was just a bunch of bad treaties and a bunch of bad ideas. At that point, it was still a bunch of empires ruling the world that were trying to get more territory. And what they did to Ottoman partitioned the country that we know today into different protectorates that were controlled by the British, the French, and the Greeks. This whole area of Western Turkey and Izmir was basically inside the Greek protectorate. And then in 1919, the Greek army, under a lot of assurances from the British Prime Minister, decided to land in Izmir, which was called Smyrna at the time, with 20,000 troops, and they were basically trying to take over this whole area. At the same time, the French also invaded Turkey from the south, but in the following 3 years, the Turkish forces fought back with surprising ferocity under Kemal Atatürk, who is considered the founder of the country, and they pushed back the French and the Greeks. And at one point, the Greeks kind of realized they're screwed because they never got the kind of help that they were promised by Britain, and there was no way they were going to win this war. And this was a lot more complicated for the Greeks than it was, let's say, for the French, because there were a lot of Greek people living in this area or just living in Turkey in general. So what ended up happening is more than 3 years after the war started, the very end of the Greco-Turkish War happened in September 1922 in Izmir, when the Turkish forces finally recaptured the very last city next to Greece. And what happened after that was very, very tragic. The whole city got burned down, and all of the Greek and Armenian quarters in the city were completely destroyed. Around 10,000 to 25,000 people died, and a lot of bad stuff happened after that too. After this war sort of ended, the governments of Greece and Turkey agreed on the Great Population Exchange of Greece and Turkey, which meant that anyone that was ethnically Greek and Christian had to move to Greece, even if they and their ancestors had lived in Turkey their whole lives. At the same time, anyone that was ethnically Turkish, even if they didn't speak Turkish, that was living in Greece, had to move and leave Greece and come to Turkey. So the governments agreed on this, but the people who were displaced were the ones that were the real victims. And it's been 100 years, so there aren't a lot of people alive who remember what happened these days. The whole story of this place is far more complex, and I'm really simplifying it, but I'll leave some links in the bio in case you want to learn more about it. and sort of understand what really happened. There's a really good book about it that I read too that I'll link in the description below, so you can check that out too if you want to get a really deep understanding of what happened in this region. Alright guys, that was enough of a history lesson. I'm gonna end the vlog from here today because this is my last day in Izmir and I'm going back to Istanbul. If you like the video, don't forget to hit that like button and share it with your friends who you think might like it. If you want to support the channel, feel free to subscribe to my channel and watch more videos from Turkey. And if you want more real-time updates where exactly I am, feel free to follow me on Instagram. I post live updates on my Instagram stories from there. I'll catch you guys from the next one.